At exactly 8:42 a.m., Karen spotted the error for the fifth GOM time, line 46B. Vendor disbursement totals inflated by $7,930.17. Not a random typo, not a fat finger. Mistake, the same suspicious rounding. She flagged 3 separate quarters in a row, and yet there was again, bold, as brass and just as smug. Her office smelled like printer toner and neglect. Flickering ceiling light gave the whole room the same vibe as a moored break room. And the weather outside looked like God hit the grayscale filter. Karen sipped her coffee lukewarm, bitter, and unrepentantly decaf, thanks to HR's wellness initiative, and scrolled through the spreadsheet like a forensic pathologist combing a crime scene. This wasn't just bad accounting. It was intentional. Numbers were being nudged, ever so gently, ways that consistently made the company look just a little more profitable, just a little more efficient than the truth would permit on federal contracts, no less. She'd worked in compliance long enough to smell a rat, and this one was wearing aftershave and cashmere socks. But what did it matter? She could already hear Davies' voice in her head. Karen, you worry too much. That's what makes you so good at your job, right? Always delivered with that car salesman grin, one that screamed bod, and backroom deals. Still, she wasn't about to let it slide. She pulled up her memo template, titled it Contract 7A4B, reporting discrepancies Q2, and began typing. No dramatics, no accusations, just clean language, bullet points, date, references, attached documentation. The kind of thing you write when you know they're going to ignore it anyway, but you still need it on the record. Hey, quick side note before we keep going. If you're one of the 97% of folks who listen to these stories without subscribing, maybe smash that button. It costs nothing, helps more than you know, and motivates a team like Davies. Motivates embezzlement with persistent oversight issues. All right, back to the story. Karen printed the memo. Yes, printed. She didn't trust Davies not to accidentally delete emails and slipped it into a plastic folder. She walked it down the carpeted hallway, past the framed motivational posters about integrity and teamwork, both of which got violently side-eyed every time she passed. She knocked twice and entered, without waiting for permission. Davies was on his Bluetooth headset, gesturing dramatically at nothing while leaning back in a chair that probably cost more than her first car. He gave her a little finger wave, finished his call with a circle back Tuesday, turned to her like she just interrupted his massage. Karen, to what do I owe the pleasure? He grinned. She held up the folder. Q2, reports. The discrepancy's still there. Page 7, vendor totals. I recommend we issue a corrected submission before audit season. It's not a yes. He cut her off, flipping open the folder with exaggerated boredom. He didn't even read it. You and your legendary I4 decimals. Karen didn't respond. She just waited. I smiled like a man whose teeth had never done an honest day's work. We'll have my guys look at it. You know how these systems glitch. It's not a system glitch, she said flatly. It's human input, consistent patterns over time, patterns that if they ever got scrutinized. Karen, he chuckled like she was a cat that meowed too loud. Relax. You always assume the worst. That's why we love you. That word, love, dripped from his tongue like oil in a puddle. Waved the folder at her like it was an amusing bit of fanfiction and tossed it onto a pile of unopened mail. She turned to leave, heart thudding not with fear, but with the sharp, awful sting of knowing she'd just handed a life raft to a man who preferred to drown in gold. Behind her, she heard him call out, "Don't worry, we'll be fine without your attention to detail. It wasn't the word that got her. It was the tone, that smirking, indulgent finality. In that moment, Karen knew something with the clarity of a lightning bolt. He thinks this is over. He thinks I walk out of here with my little folder and disappear. But Karen had spent 15 years being the woman who read the fine print. No one else bothered with. The only difference today, she was finally going to use it. The summons came at 10:14 a.m., less than 2 hours after she handed him the memo. Davies wants to see you. Chirp Mara from HR, voice as artificially sweet as the air freshener that failed to mask whatever died in the break room microwave last week. Karen knew before she stood up. The walk to his office felt like a funeral march, except the corpse was still breathing and had a retirement plan. She passed the open plan sales pit. Young guys in ill-fitting suits playfully tossing stress balls. Girls too new to know that wearing heels here meant they'd be used as scapegoats within 6 fiscal quarters. None of them looked up. They never did. Mr. Davies's office door was open, wide enough to feel performative. Inside, the man himself was seated, behind his walnut desk, which gleamed like it had been licked by angels. The blinds were tilted just enough to let the light hit his Rolex. His hair was perfect in that unnerving helmet-like way that only happens when vanity overrides logic. Karen, he said, arms out like she was walking into a surprise party and not her own execution. Have a seat. She did, spine straight, hands folded. Her folder with the memo still sat in the inbox tray on his credenza untouched. Of course it was. He opened a manila envelope, slid a stack of papers across the desk toward her like he was dealing cards. So after a lot of strategic soul searching, and I mean a lot, we decided to realign a few roles, streamline, maximize efficiency. You know the drill. Karen blinked. You're terminating me. Davies grinned like it was all a harmless prank. I prefer the term liberating your potential. Look, you're incredibly talented. No one's denying that. But let's be honest, compliance isn't exactly where the action is. We need more agile thinkers, people who can pivot, not just catalog risks all day. She stared at the papers. Her name was printed on the top, severance package. 1 week for every year of service. A pittance dress in legal ease. There was even a little company branded pen clipped to the folder as if that made it classy. Karen's throat tightened, but her voice stayed level. Because I filed a report this morning, Davies leaned back in his chair and laughed. A full, open-mouthed, teeth-baring laugh. The kind that fills a room like mildew. Karen, no. Come on. You're not being punished. This was already in motion. It's got nothing to do with your memo. Jesus, you think we make executive decisions off a spreadsheet? Off a pattern of fraud in a Fed Ally funded contract. She corrected. That made him pause just for a second. Then he shook his head, amused, always dramatic. This is why compliance people don't make CEO. You see danger in shadows, patterns in coffee stains. Then he picked up his Montblanc pen, silver-plated, a gift from the board, signed the final page like it was a greeting card. Clicked the pen. Shut, slid it to her with that infuriating salesman wink. Best of luck. Karen, I mean it. Maybe now you'll find somewhere that appreciates your talent. For nitpicking, there was that word. Again, nitpicking. As if ethics were dandruff. As if 15 years of insuring federal code compliance was the work of a hobbyist with a magnifying glass. She took the folder. She didn't cry, didn't scream, given the pleasure. But the laughter stayed in the air, clinging to her like static That sound would follow her all day like a song stuck in her head. And later, when the wheels of federal justice began to turn in Davies, found himself unzipping his accounts for a judge instead of an escort, she would remember that laugh not as a symbol of his power, but as a timestamp. The last moment he ever had the upper hand. The cardboard box they gave her was too small for 15 years. She stuffed it. Anyway, photos, her ancient stapler, the good one that never jammed, 2 mugs, one plant that was half dead and half. Spite. Her hand shook at first, but it wasn't sadness anymore. It was something quieter, heavier, like concrete setting around her rib cage. Karen's desk was already being eyed by someone in HR. A younger girl with full casual curiosity loitered nearby, pretending to sort printer paper. From the corner of her eye, Erin could see her colleagues, people she'd eaten sheet cake with during birthdays, shared donuts with during audits, suddenly become experts in avoidance. No eye contact, no real goodbyes, just a few limp sorry to see. You goes offer like expired coupons, no. One plan to redeem when she reached under her monitor stand and pulled out the black Moleskine notebooks, the ones she never synced to company drives. She didn't care who noticed whose pages were, filled with handwritten notes, margin, scribbles, dates, invoice numbers tiny. Red flags she'd noticed for years and never dared to connect until now. She slid them into the box like sacred relics because they were. She walked the corridor one last time, heels clicking, like punctuation marks in an unfinished sentence. The silence was brutal. Phones rang, keyboards clicked, but her world was dissolving into noise she was no longer part of. She stepped outside, and there he was, Mr. Davies, in the parking lot, leaning on the hood of his brand new Audi R8 Spider, all smug chrome and midlife crisis, laughing with 2 of the other execs, sunglasses pushed up on his forehead like he was posing for a god. Yacht cataloged. Karen stopped halfway between the building and her Honda with the cracked bumper, watched him gesture toward the car's engine like it had cured cancer. One of the execs, only from procurement, a man who once asked if compliance was just fancy spelch. Check. Toss a joke that made Davies throw his head back and laugh again. That same laugh, her fingers clenched, the edge of the box so tight the cardboard creaked. It hit her like a lightning bolt to the spine. This man had taken her job, her dignity, her future, and traded it for horsepower and high fives. He'd cut her loose not because she was wrong, but because she was in the way. He thought that was it, that she'd go home, mourn, and move on. Instead, Karen stood perfectly still in the muggy spring air and memorized the sight of him, the tailored blazer, the cocky stance, the stupid grin. Then she opened her trunk, placed the box gently. Inside, sat behind the wheel and took a deep breath. Not a single tear, not one. She looked down at the passenger seat. Her backup flash drive sat in the cup, holder right where she'd left it last. Weak, containing full copies of every compliance report she'd ever filed. Davies hadn't fired her. He'd unshackled her, and he was about to find out what a nitpicker could do with federal statute, a paper trail, and absolutely nothing left to lose. The diner was called LSE, though there was no Lou, just a bitter woman named Rita, who looked like she'd smoked through both of her marriages and now took orders like each one was a personal insult. Erin slid into the corner booth like a ghost, returning to the scene of her own murder. The vinyl seat hissed under her. Wait. She dropped her coat beside her and pulled the cardboard box onto the table. Her notebooks came out first, then her phone, charger, and a ballpoint. Pen so worn down the logo was just a greasy smudge. Rita brought her a mug of coffee that tasted like it had been filtered through an old sock and hatred. You want a menu? Karen shook her head. Just keep the coffee coming. Sure, Rita muttered. Hope whatever he did, he regrets it. Karen didn't reply. Not yet. She plugged in her phone and opened her cloud backups. Every compliance report she'd ever filed was there. Every memo, every flagged entry. Her fingers moved fast like muscle. Memory had taken over. The grief, the humiliation, the ache in her chest gone, packed away in some mental crawl space. What was left was calculation, pattern, recognition, purpose. The time she reached her second refill, she had a short list of transactions that didn't make sense unless someone wanted them to not make sense. Vendors bill for items never received, inflated labor hours on, contracts that had already been closed, and always the same accounts, signed off by the same three names. But this wasn't just about spreadsheets anymore. She opened her browser and typed federal whistleblower, report fraud, government contract portal, bureaucracy, loves long names. Luckily, Karen had worked in the belly of it for years. She knew where to look. The contract Davies had flaunted so proudly. Contract H hashtag 7A4B fell under the jurisdiction of the Office of Inspector General for the Department of Energy. She followed link after link until she landed on the golden portal. Report fraud, waste, or abuse office of the Inspector General. She stared at the page for a long moment, letting the gravity settle. Then she began to read carefully, thoroughly. That's when she found it. Section 132.4, Subpart Item, Protections. It was everything. Under the False Claims Act, individuals who reported fraud involving federal funds could not only remain anonymous, they could initiate a civil action on behalf of the government and receive a percentage of recovered damages. More importantly, if the evidence was considered credible and timely, the agency was required to initiate a preliminary review within hours. Her coffee had gone cold. She drank it. Anyway, Karen reached for her notebook and flipped to the page she'd labeled Redundant Anomalies. She started a new column beside each entry. Contract ID, dollar variance, signatory, frequency, cross-referenced them with the internal audit calendar and highlighted every transaction that fell just outside of review scope windows. None of it was dramatic. That's what made it effective. Quiet, intentional shifts in timing, just enough to escape scrutiny. She drafted her outline the way she used to. Write audit rebuttals. Clean, bullet-pointed, emotionless dates, figures, attached files. Her eyes stung from staring, but she didn't stop. She wasn't building a case. She was constructing a noose. Rita returned with a fresh pot and paused when she saw the Warzona papers. You working on a novel? Karen didn't look up. Something like that. Well, Rita muttered, pouring, hope the ending's worth it. Karen smiled. Small, sharp. Oh, it will be. Then she clicked start new submission and began. Karen's fingers hovered over the keyboard like she was defusing a bomb, which in a way she was. Subject line. Stared back at her from the top of the submission form, crisp and precise. Urgent review of potential accounting. Discrepancies in contract H number 7A4B below. She'd written exactly 713 words. No more, no less. Every sentence cut to the bone. No passive aggression. No emotional flourishes, just clean. Language forged from the steel of decades in compliance. Attached are 5 examples of financial inconsistencies involving vendor billing under contract. Hash 7A4B between 2022 Q2 and 2024 Q1. Each instance reflects favorable errors that disproportionately benefited the contractor. Supporting documentation includes internal memos, transaction, summaries, invoice copies, and internal review logs. She attached 3 PDFs, 2 Excel sheets, and 1 image scan of an internal email chain from Davies himself. Approved. The feds are here. They're changing the locks on Davies' office. She froze. Then came the third one, an image, blurry, crooked from the end of the hallway like Jenny had been crouching behind the break room Keurig. 2 individuals stood outside the executive. Suite, black suits, clipboard, no, smiles. One held a black leather case. The other was talking to HR, and there, in the background, unmistakable in its faux mahogany glory, was a closed, double-door entrance to Davies's kingdom. Karen's breath caught. Her first thought wasn't triumph. It was, oh God, it's real. He stared at the image like it was a painting of the last. Judgment. No more hypotheticals. No more mental chess. This wasn't just a frozen asset order. This was physical boots on carpet. This was real people in real suits with real authority changing real locks. Another ping. They escorted. Cheryl out of finance. She's crying. Someone's digging through the expense reports folder right now. People are freaking the hell out. Karen gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. Palms were damp. Her heart pounded like it wanted out of her chest. Davies, she typed, 3 dots post. Then he's not here. Left after lunch. Probably still. Doesn't know. But everyone else does. Karen stood up from the couch. Adrenaline roaring through her so fast. Her knees wobbled. She paced her living room like she was in a holding cell. Her brain fired in every direction. What are they looking at? Are they going through her old reports? Are they pulling surveillance? They call her again. She checked the news, local Twitter, accounts, even Reddit. Nothing. Not yet. It was happening fast. Too fast for the press, which meant it was strategic. Silent, contained for now. Jenny's next. Text was quieter, like a whisper on the page. Karen, it's bad. They brought boxes, like seizure boxes. That image, the feds bringing cardboard boxes into the executive suite, hit Karen harder than she expected. She pictured her old office, quiet cubicle of spreadsheets, and ethics sitting just down the hall. From Davies's glass palace, she imagined those boxes slowly filling up with the Empire's dirty laundry, and suddenly the memory of his laugh, warm, dismissive, cruel, played in her mind again, but now it sounded distant, smaller, like it was echoing from the bottom of a well. Karen sat down slowly. Her fingers hovered over her keyboard, unsure what to do. Next, she didn't need to do anything. The machinery was moving in somewhere in that office, in the swirl of panic and confiscated hard drives. Someone was asking the question Davies never thought he'd hear. Who was Karen Hill? They were about to find out. At 6:03 p.m., Karen's inbox chimed with new message. Zenda, encrypted notice at District Court OFC. Subject, Court Order Civil Injunction. Notice/ref 1183 29 QT. She stared at it for a few seconds. Heart thumping like it had grown its own engine. The header wasn't dramatic. No, red stamps, no bold fonts, just black. Text on a white screen. Cold, surgical, real. She clicked it. The body of the email was brief. 3 lines of bureaucratic courtesy thanking her for her cooperation and confirming she was listed as the originating party in a sealed matter under active review. Attached 1 PDF encrypted password. Protected. Her access code was the last 4 digits of her social plus the month and year of submission. She entered it with trembling fingers. The document opened, and there it was. United States. District Court Emergency Injunction. Civil case no 1,183,200. 9 QT. Her eyes skim the first paragraph. Then again. Then a third time slower, as if reading it carefully would make it more permanent, based on credible evidence of significant and systematic reporting irregularities related to Federal Contract 7A4B, the court hereby issues an emergency injunction against Respondent Martin Davies, CEO of Corvent Solutions, to freeze all business and personal assets pending evidentiary review. She felt it like a punch, not painful but seismic. Every word landed like a gavel. Credible evidence. Systematic reporting irregularities. Freeze all assets. Her gaze caught on his name, Martin Davies. Right there, under respondent, black text. No swagger. No expensive suit. Just ink and accountability. Further down, language got even sharper. Respondent is to appear before the court within 48 hours to provide a detailed explanation of financial methodologies employed under said contract. Failure to comply will result in escalated enforcement. Karen, read it twice, then a third time. She leaned back in her chair, arms slack at her sides, and just stared at the screen. This was it. This was the moment. The world acknowledged what she'd been shouting into the void for years. It didn't come with applause. It didn't come with confetti or cheering or even a thank you note. It came in a 14-page court order with footnotes and citations, and it was perfect. The justice wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. It was quiet, powerful, the kind of justice that doesn't need to yell because it carries a federal seal and the threat of prison time. Karen let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. For the first time all day, she allowed herself to close her eyes. The laugh, his laugh was gone, replaced by silence, glorious humming silence. She opened her eyes again and scrolled back to the top of the document. Her cursor hovered, then clicked print, because this wasn't just evidence. This was a trophy. At 6:42 p.m., Karen's phone buzzed once. Jenny, he knows it was you. They just escorted him out of the building. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Karen stared at the text, motionless. Read it again, slower. She pictured it. Davies in his tailored blazer and overpriced loafers, watching. 2 agents walk into his office with clipboards and lockboxes, watching his name disappear from the door. He'd once boomed through like a sitcom dad, watching the empire he built on smirks and shortcuts collapse in real time. She imagined the exact moment it hit him, that the numbers Karen flagged, the ones he called nitpicking, were the nails in his corporate coffin, that the quiet woman with the Moleskine notebook wasn't just an overpaid rule follower. She was the God Reaper. Karen glanced at her screen. The court order still glowed on her laptop, each line of him in the gospel of vindication. She leaned back in her chair, the room finally exhaling. With her, the buzz of the fridge, the ticking wall clock, the world unchanged. But she was 6 hours ago. He laughed, loud, confident, careless. Now the laugh was just a memory, thin, shriveled, meaningless, like a balloon deflating in a funeral home. She stood, walked to the cabinet above her fridge, and pulled down a dusty foil-top bottle of Corbel she'd been saving for something good. She hadn't known what that meant at the time. A new job, a birthday, a weekend without guilt. This was better. She popped the cork. It sounded like freedom. No toast of friends, no speech. Just her in her little kitchen, glass in hand, watching the digital guillotine fall from 200 m away. She lifted the Glass of the fine print, she said, quietly, and the fools who never read. It. Then she sipped and smiled. Thanks for joining the fun, you office. Survivors. Subscribe for more Switch. Flicking drama.